Good evening, friends. The operational situation at the front by the end of the 11th of February. We will start with the area of Sinkovka. We asked for comment. There is a lot of news background, a lot of misinformation. It means that Russian troops were able to gain a foothold in the northern part of Sinkovka. We asked for comment on this point. Look, there's going to be a lot of information from the enemy right now. I don't mean from me. In short, without significant changes. I understand why there are so many questions, because the situation at the front is difficult. In fact, a lot of people are talking about it, and of course, people react very sharply to this. I understand, we do not fix any changes. In general, there are no significant changes in the Kupiansk-Lymansk sector of the front. We are moving on to the Bakhmut direction. We will start from the northern flank, the Bogdanovka area, the Popovsky forest, so from this section of the front. What's going on? The first point is the most important. The enemy is attacking. There are a lot of attacks now. Why are there so many attacks? Because of the weather conditions. It's also foggy today. Those who know what the situation is at the front in many areas, in general, is not the best weather for aerial reconnaissance. Naturally, there will be a lot of attacks now. As for the Popovsky forest, active hostilities continue. The information from this area is contradictory. There is a report that it was possible to push the Russian troops from some of the positions. This is the first moment. The second point is that they are attacking along the railway and have advanced. Well, in short, let's be blunt, the situation remains dynamic in this area. Yes, the enemy is making a lot of attempts to advance now, including along the railway, to gain a foothold at the intersection, and of course in the Popovsky forest itself. Therefore, the fighting continues without significant changes. We are moving to the Avdeevka direction. It remains the hottest point on the map for us. A lot of the enemy is also attacking today, and today the fighters from the field recorded a summary, weather conditions. Who saw or did not see Tyana? Well, actually there is fog there. In other words, aerial reconnaissance, as we understand it, is not as effective, as it is clear that in clear weather. Therefore, there are a lot of ponds now. In fact, the fighters themselves report that the pond is being pressed very hard. Moreover, there is no specific vector, that the task is set there conditionally a log, or to break through to Avtovez. Where they find a gap in the defense, they try to break through it accordingly. Well, now let's actually look at the situation on this sector of the front. We will start not exactly from Avdeevka, but a little north of it, from the section between Gorlovskaya and New York. So as you remember, the UPU attacked Russian troops in a number of positions. These strikes serve, among other things, to delay the forces of Russian troops from Avdeevka, because for them, naturally, Gorlovka is a very important area. If we take into account, when they were fighting for the landfill, as you remember, the Russian troops pulled there. Well, let's put it mildly, an impressive force. In other words, they returned a number of positions at the landfill. Naturally, they did not go further. Their main task is to hold the line of defense that we have, well, conditionally, which we had before the 22nd, until the 20th year in this area. And we have a similar situation again, but a little southwest of the landfill itself. Here then, it was possible, as you remember, to dislodge abandoned Russian troops from a number of positions. From the support at the gas station, they counterattacked. To date, active hostilities are continuing in this sector of the front, and the enemy is really pulling up combat-ready forces here. That is, it does not throw at random. Let's say, it will not be possible to stabilize the situation, namely experienced ones for stabilization. Therefore, we do not record any new changes. Active hostilities continue, but this area, as we see, Gorlovka, is extremely important for the enemy. He immediately throws some forces. Now we turn to Avdeevka itself. This means that the Ukrainian armed forces are taking all necessary measures, not only in Avdeevka itself, in the Avdeevka direction, on the flanks, but also in neighboring areas, in order to delay the Russian troops as much as possible somewhere, in order to try to stabilize the situation. Now Avdeevka. So, by dachas and carpool. There are some changes in dachas, we have marked them on the map. Actually, let's make changes. By the evening, the situation is with us until lunch, and this evening. We said that yes, Russian troops had entered the territory of the dachas. Some of our osinters, like those who are also directly connected with the fighters from the field, have information. Reported that the enemy had advanced visually on their map. And yes, this information corresponds to reality. The enemy is present, that is, he moved and secured the railway. Will he be able to hold these positions? Of course, this is a difficult question for now, at least in the short term, because there are also a lot of counterattacks on the part of the APU, because everyone understands perfectly well that the intersection of the Highway 00542 with Industrial Avenue is one of the key points for the enemy. Well, and an attempt to break through as much as possible to Industrial Avenue, where there is a building, to take a number of positions either at the Brevno complex or in the area of the Avdeevka carpool. This is what we see now. There are also attacks in the direction of garages, well, and the carpool itself. There are a lot of fights going on. I will say this, the situation is quite complicated if we are talking about the carpool area, because well, you need to understand that on the way to Industrial Avenue, on what the enemy has put in the plans of his command. Naturally, the carpool is one of the key goals, so there is a lot of money for it now. And since it is from the territory of the Garden Partnership, it is also west of the railway and near the garage area. The situation is being further clarified, what we have noted for tonight, and active hostilities continue. As for the railway lane, we have more clarifications, because the information on this building was confirmed. Russian troops were present in it, so it is marked. But this, let's say, clarification should have been in the morning, we left this information for further clarification. Well, yes, indeed, the enemy is very seriously pressing. And not only on this site, we also talked with you, that he is storming, and means a number of streets between the sandpit and the railway, well, to be specific, the alley of the 50th anniversary of the Avdeevka coke plant in this part, and also continue assault operations in the direction of Donetsk Beach, attacking along the embankment, well, including along Stepnaya Street in the south direction. Therefore, active hostilities are underway, and all necessary measures are being taken by the armed forces of Ukraine to stabilize the situation. Therefore, of course, I would like the picture to change to a more positive one in the near future, but we will proceed from what we have, because the situation is very difficult, and the fighters themselves record from the ground that everything is flying around the clock. Aerial bombs, rocket airstrikes, of course, barrel artillery, rocket-propelled guns, mortars. In other words, the enemy has used the entire range of its weapons, except for nuclear weapons, of course, now in Avdeevka. So the situation is very difficult. There are again a number of statements from officials that there are no fights in Avdeevka. There is such a moment, you asked me to comment, but let's wait for the denouement and look at what the reaction will be. What am I talking about? After Bakhmut Solidar, our society stopped trusting to some extent. Trust not the military, but trust those who misinform a lot. Because, well, you need to say it directly, the society also has a friend, brother, uncle who is fighting, yes, and he also knows the information, he can report something, and of course this information differs from the official one. So trust is lost. It's better to say it as it is. The situation is difficult, we are taking all necessary measures. It is better to briefly, but not to lie about the fact that, well, the enemy failed to enter Avdeevka, and so on, because the battles are going well. Quite a large territory, if we speak for Avdeevka itself, because it is located within the city. There is such a moment, but these are thoughts out loud as they say. Moving on the southern flank, we do not record significant changes by the evening, but there is enemy activity in this area, including armored vehicles. Everything is also within the road where she attacked before. Just footage of one unit, fire damage was inflicted specifically on the tank, it was hit or destroyed. There is not the end of the video, what I saw in front of the drone was attacked, but in general, They are trying to reverse the course of events in this sector of the front, not only with manpower but also with equipment. We do not fix any changes. On May Day, active hostilities continue in the settlement itself. By the end of the day, we do not record any new negative changes, and the situation is of course on further clarification in this area because there is quite high activity on both sides. Well, on the part of the APU, all necessary measures are being taken, including aerial reconnaissance, and not only shooting battles are being dropped, so that you understand that the APU is working as much as possible at a distance, distancing itself from the shooting battles of neighbors, and it is drones. But the situation remains complicated. Kurakovsky direction without significant changes in Georgievka, its eastern part, Severno-Georgievsky rate, and Novomikhailivka were asked to comment because there is a lot of information, including from foreign publications, such as the Bild, for example, that the enemy has entered. There are assault operations not only in the east, but also managed to and from the south to break through, from the area of the cemetery and the industrial zone respectively. Go to one of the streets. The situation is quite dynamic, I'll tell you so. The fighting is going on. Here just the same, the close-range battles of the Strelkovs do not allow the Russian troops of the armed forces to gain a foothold. But the enemy has reserves, and he also distorts his attacks on neighboring areas in this sector of the front. What we said in the afternoon, from the settlement of Sweet, along the Salty Beam was moving. Well, the attacks, they have a positional character, but still they are from the area of the fortified menagerie. In other words, it is also a distracting maneuver on the part of the enemy, in order to disperse our forces in the area as much as possible. Well, you should also understand that it is impossible not to react to this, because any promotion, it can aggravate the situation in Novomikhailivka. Therefore, the fighting within the gray zone, in short, within the gray zone continues. I will comment on the Orekhovsky section of the front without any changes and on the markets. They asked us to comment in more detail because we miss a lot of the bridgehead, but in fact, there are a minimum of comments that can actually be given due to the fact that, well, there are no significant changes. There is combat work on both sides, mutual artillery shelling, intensive drone work on our part, FB drones, bombers of large P-18th, which are called Baba Yago. According to the visual, I added a gray zone. Today there were shots from the enemy. The AFU still threw Russian troops a little bit out of the building. Well, there is a minimally added gray area. Therefore, the combat work continues, but the situation, as you remember, is dynamic. And the enemy also periodically attacks in the settlement itself, from the limits of the red zone. There is also some activity in the forest area, but it has more of a positional, I would say, character. Small infantry groups are attacking there. And as for technology, there is much less technology. If we even compare February-January these days, then they use much less, because they understand that everything is fine with the APU drones in this sector of the front, so they do not allow tanks and armored vehicles to come close to work. Therefore, the situation here is without any changes. That's the summary we have today for the end of the day.